She walked past him, thinking he was just another homeless man, but when she saw the birthmark on his hand, her heart stopped because the man she thought was dead for 13 years was standing right in front of her, and he had her daughter in his arms. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The November wind whistled through the concrete canyons of downtown Chicago, carrying with it the bite of approaching winter. Ethan Cole pulled his thin jacket tighter around himself and his sleeping daughter. The cardboard beneath them did little to shield them from the cold seeping up through the sidewalk, but it was better than nothing. Lily stirred in his arms, mumbling something in her sleep. Her small fingers clutched at his worn sweater, seeking warmth. Ethan adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, making sure her ears were covered by the knit cap he'd managed to get from the shelter last week. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "Dad's got you." The words felt hollow in his throat. What kind of father let his daughter sleep on the streets? The thought gnawed at him constantly, along with the crushing weight of shame that had become his constant companion. Above them, the bus stop awning creaked in the wind. The digital display blinked 6:45 a.m., casting an eerie blue glow over their temporary sanctuary. Early morning traffic had already begun to pick up, with cars rushing past in a steady stream of noise and exhaust. A group of early morning commuters huddled at the far end of the bus stop, carefully averting their eyes from Ethan and Lily. He was used to it by now. The careful distance people kept, the way their gazes slid past him as if he were invisible. Sometimes, being invisible felt like a blessing. Other times, it was just another reminder of how far he'd fallen. Lily shivered against him, and Ethan tucked the blanket more securely around her small frame. Her dark hair peeked out from under the cap, reminding him so much of her mother, of Harper, that it made his chest ache. He pushed the thought away, like he always did. Those memories belonged to another life, one he'd lost the right to claim. The street sweeper rumbled past, its brushes scraping against the curb. The sound made Lily stir again, and this time her eyes fluttered open. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Morning, sunshine." Ethan managed a smile for her. "Did you sleep okay?" Lily nodded, sitting up and stretching. "I dreamed about pancakes," she said matter-of-factly, with lots of syrup. The simple statement felt like a knife in Ethan's heart. When was the last time he'd been able to give his daughter something as simple as pancakes? "Maybe we can get something at the shelter later," he offered, knowing it wasn't the same. "It's okay, Dad." Lily patted his arm with a wisdom far beyond her 8 years. "I'm not really hungry yet anyway." Across the street, the massive glass and steel office building caught the first rays of morning sun, its windows blazing like fire. Sterling Innovations. The name stood out in sleek silver letters against the dark facade. Ethan had walked past it countless times in the last few weeks, drawn to the area despite himself. Maybe some part of him had known who worked inside those gleaming walls. The morning crowd began to thicken as more people headed to work. Ethan helped Lily fold their blanket, tucking it into the worn backpack that contained everything they owned. They had learned to move quickly, to make themselves scarce before someone decided they were a nuisance and called security. A commotion near the building caught his attention. An elderly man in a janitor's uniform had stumbled, spilling his coffee across the sidewalk. Without thinking, Ethan moved to help, his hands shaking slightly from the cold as he helped the man steady himself. "Thank you, son," the janitor said, looking embarrassed as Ethan helped him pick up his thermos. "These old legs aren't what they used to be." "No problem, sir." Ethan's voice was rough from disuse. He noticed the man's name tag read Frank. "Are you okay?" "Just fine, just fine." Frank patted his pockets, checking for anything else he might have dropped. "Say, you wouldn't happen to want a cup of coffee, would you? I've got an extra thermos in my locker." Before Ethan could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver got out quickly to open the rear door, and a woman stepped out. Even from across the sidewalk, her presence commanded attention. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan had seen in the past year. Her dark hair swept back in an elegant twist. Harper Sterling. She looked exactly the same and completely different all at once. Success had given her an air of authority that the young woman he'd known hadn't possessed, but her face was still the one that haunted his dreams. She paused, her eyes sweeping the scene before her. Ethan knew the moment she noticed him. Her perfectly composed expression flickered, just for a second. Her gaze dropped to his left hand, still gripping Frank's thermos, and he knew what she was seeing. the crescent-shaped birthmark that had always made him unique. Their eyes met across the morning crowd, and time seemed to stop. In that moment, Ethan saw recognition dawn in her eyes, followed by disbelief and something else. Something that made him want to run as far and as fast as he could. Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, are you okay?" The moment shattered. Ethan handed the thermos back to Frank with mumbled thanks and turned away, guiding Lily toward the bus stop. He could feel Harper's eyes following him, burning into his back. But he didn't look back. He couldn't. Behind him, he heard Frank's voice. "Miss Sterling, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Harper's voice came, steady but with an undercurrent of something uncertain. "I just thought I saw someone I used to know." Harper Sterling stepped out of her office building the next morning, her thoughts still lingering on the man she'd seen yesterday. The crescent birthmark on his left hand had haunted her dreams all night. She clutched 2 paper cups of coffee from the building's cafe, their warmth seeping through her leather gloves. The morning sun cast long shadows across the frost-covered sidewalk. There, in the same spot as yesterday, lay the man and his daughter. The little girl was already awake, humming softly as she arranged a small collection of painted rocks beside their makeshift bed. Harper's heels clicked against the concrete as she approached them. The sound made Ethan's eyes flutter open, immediately alert and protective. He sat up quickly, positioning himself between Harper and his daughter. "Good morning," Harper said, her voice softer than her usual businesslike tone. "I thought you might like some coffee." She extended one of the cups toward him. Ethan hesitated, his eyes studying her face with a mixture of wariness and something else. Recognition? Fear? He accepted the cup with slightly trembling hands, careful to avoid touching her fingers. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was rough from the cold, but there was a gentleness to it that made Harper's heart skip a beat. It was so familiar. The little girl peeked around her father's shoulder, her bright eyes curious. "Can I have some too, Daddy?" "This is too hot for you, sweetheart," Ethan said, his entire demeanor softening as he spoke to his daughter. Harper found herself smiling at their interaction. "I'm Harper Sterling," she introduced herself. Though something told her he already knew who she was. "And you are?" "Ethan," he replied after a pause. "And this is Lily." "Hi, Miss Sterling," Lily chirped, waving one small hand. She was wearing mittens with cartoon characters on them, the wool worn thin at the fingertips. Harper crouched down, careful to keep her designer suit from touching the ground. "Those are lovely rocks you have there, Lily." "I paint them myself," Lily said proudly. "Daddy helps me find the smoothest ones." The morning traffic rushed by behind them, but Harper felt suspended in this moment, struck by how this child could maintain such joy despite her circumstances. She straightened up, making a decision. "Listen," she said, meeting Ethan's eyes. "It's freezing out here. Would you and Lily like to come inside? The cafe makes excellent breakfast, and it's warm." Ethan's hand tightened around the coffee cup. "We don't need charity, Miss Sterling." "It's not charity," Harper replied firmly. "Consider it a thank you for helping Carl with his spilled coffee yesterday." "I saw that, you know." Something flickered across Ethan's face, surprise, perhaps, that she had noticed his small act of kindness. He looked down at Lily, who was bouncing slightly on her toes, clearly excited at the prospect of a warm breakfast. "Please, Daddy?" Lily whispered, though Harper could still hear her. "My tummy's making the growly noise again." Ethan's resistance crumbled at his daughter's words. "All right," he conceded, carefully gathering their few belongings into a worn backpack. "Thank you, Miss Sterling." "Harper," she corrected him automatically. "Please, call me Harper." As they walked toward the building's entrance, Harper couldn't help but notice how Ethan kept Lily close to his side, how his eyes darted around as if mapping escape routes. The security guard at the door nodded respectfully to Harper while giving Ethan a suspicious glance. "They're with me, Marcus," Harper said firmly, leading them to the elevator. Inside the lobby, the warm air wrapped around them like a blanket. The marble floors gleamed beneath the crystal chandeliers, and the sound of clicking heels and business conversations echoed off the walls. Harper watched as Lily's eyes grew wide, taking in the grandeur of it all. But it was Ethan's reaction that caught her attention. He stood completely still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the elaborate fountain in the center of the lobby. Something about his expression, a mixture of pain and memory, sent a shiver down Harper's spine. She'd seen that exact same expression before, years ago, when she'd first brought her college sweetheart to see the building her father had just purchased. The same building where she now served as CEO. The déjà vu hit her so strongly that she had to steady herself against the wall. Ethan noticed and took a half step toward her, his hand reaching out instinctively before he caught himself and pulled back. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Yes," Harper said, forcing a smile. "Yes, I'm fine. The cafe is this way." As she led them down the hallway, her mind raced with possibilities and questions. The birthmark, his familiar gestures, the way he looked at the fountain, it all added up to something she wasn't quite ready to face. Not yet. The cafe was nearly empty at this hour, most of the morning rush having already headed up to their offices. Harper guided them to a quiet corner booth, far from prying eyes. As Lily slid into the plush seat with obvious delight, Harper caught Ethan watching her with an expression of such raw gratitude that it made her throat tight. "Order whatever you'd like," she said, handing them menus. "I need to make a quick phone call, but I'll be right back." Stepping away from the table, Harper pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad for a moment before she made the call. "James? It's Harper Sterling. I need you to look into something for me, discreetly." She glanced back at the table, where Ethan was helping Lily sound out the words on the menu. "There's someone I need you to investigate." The sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harper's private conference room, casting a warm glow across the polished wooden table. Ethan sat awkwardly in one of the plush leather chairs, his worn clothes a stark contrast to the elegant surroundings. Lily had dozed off on a comfortable couch in the corner, wrapped in a soft blanket one of Harper's assistants had brought. "Please, eat as much as you'd like," Harper said, gesturing to the spread of breakfast foods on the table. She'd ordered everything she could think of: fresh pastries, fruit, eggs, and hot coffee. Ethan picked up a croissant with careful movements, as if afraid of damaging something so delicate. "Thank you, Miss Sterling. This is very kind of you." Harper watched him, noting how his shoulders remained tense despite her efforts to make him comfortable. "Please, call me Harper." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. "Would you tell me about yourself, Ethan?" He glanced at Lily before answering, his eyes softening. "Not much to tell, really. Just trying to do right by my daughter." "You mentioned earlier that you work with wood. Are you a carpenter?" Something flickered across his face. Pride, maybe? Or nostalgia? "Used to be. Had my own business, actually. Custom furniture, home renovations, that sort of thing." Harper's heart skipped a beat. She kept her voice steady as she asked, "What happened?" Ethan's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. "There was an accident. Construction site." He swallowed hard. "I was working on a big project, a renovation for a historical building. The scaffolding collapsed." Harper's hands began to tremble. She clasped them tightly in her lap, remembering the phone call she'd received 13 years ago, the one that had changed everything. "The medical bills," Ethan continued, his voice growing quieter. "They just kept piling up. Lost my business, my savings, everything. And then?" He glanced at Lily again. "Well, life has a way of throwing curveballs." "How long ago was this accident?" Harper asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "About 13 years ago now." Ethan's hand unconsciously moved to rub his left shoulder. "Broke quite a few bones. They said I was lucky to survive." Harper's mind raced. The timing, the details, they aligned perfectly with what she remembered. She studied his face, trying to see past the beard and the weathered features. The way he held himself, even now, had that familiar, careful grace she remembered. "And Lily's mother?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Ethan's expression closed off. "It's just been Lily and me for a long time now." Harper nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She took another sip of coffee, buying time to steady her voice. The morning light caught the crescent-shaped birthmark on his left hand as he reached for another pastry. That distinctive mark, she'd traced it with her fingers countless times during late-night study sessions in college. "Ethan," she said softly, "have you ever been to Grand Haven, the small town near Lake Michigan?" His hand froze halfway to his mouth. For a moment, something like recognition flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by confusion and what looked like guilt. He set the pastry down carefully. I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost its steadiness. "I've never been there." Harper leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure? The lighthouse there? The musical fountain in the summer?" "Miss Sterling, Harper," Ethan interrupted, pushing his chair back slightly. "I appreciate your kindness, but I think we should go. Lily and I have taken up enough of your time. Please, you don't have to. We do." Ethan stood up, moving to wake Lily. "Thank you for breakfast." It was very generous. Harper watched as he gently roused his daughter, gathering their few belongings with careful movements. His hands were shaking slightly, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. "At least let me help," Harper began, but Ethan was already guiding Lily toward the door. "Good day, Miss Sterling," he said, firmly, his voice carrying a finality that stopped her from following. Harper remained seated as they left, her mind whirling with questions and half-formed theories. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. "James, it's Harper Sterling. I need you to look into someone for me." She paused, watching through the window as Ethan and Lily crossed the lobby below. "His name is Ethan. I need everything you can find about an accident 13 years ago, and—" She took a deep breath. "I need you to confirm if he's the same Ethan Cole who was reported dead in 2010. Harper Sterling stood at her office window, her manicured fingers pressed against the cool glass. 40 stories below, Chicago's streets pulsed with life, but her mind was elsewhere. The memory of Ethan's face, worn by years of hardship yet achingly familiar, haunted her thoughts. Her office phone buzzed. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Richards is here with the information you requested." "Send him in," Harper said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The door opened with a soft click. Thomas Richards, her most trusted investigator, entered, carrying a thick manila folder. His grave expression made Harper's stomach tighten. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. She took her own seat, hands folded carefully on the polished surface. "Miss Sterling," Richards began, opening the folder, "I've confirmed your suspicions. The man outside is indeed Ethan Cole, your former fiancé." Harper's breath caught in her throat. She'd known, somehow, from the moment she'd seen that crescent-shaped birthmark, but hearing it confirmed made her dizzy. "Tell me everything," she managed. Richards pulled out several documents. 13 years ago, Ethan Cole was involved in a severe construction accident at one of his work sites. A scaffold collapsed. He was presumed dead when they couldn't find his body in the rubble. But clearly, he survived, Harper whispered. "Yes, he was found unconscious several blocks away. The theory is he wandered in a confused state after the impact. He spent 6 months in a hospital with severe injuries and memory issues." Richards paused, shuffling through more papers. By the time he fully recovered, his business had collapsed under mounting debts. Medical bills destroyed what was left of his savings. Harper closed her eyes, remembering the ambitious young carpenter she'd fallen in love with in college. The man who could look at a piece of wood and see the beautiful furniture hiding inside it. The man who had promised her forever. "What happened next?" she asked, opening her eyes. "He tried to rebuild, but—" Richards hesitated. "The economy was bad. No one was hiring. Then his wife left." "Wife?" Harper's voice cracked. "He married about a year after the accident. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. She abandoned him and their daughter, Lily." Harper's hands trembled. She remembered the little girl's sweet face, so innocent despite her circumstances. "And after that?" "A downward spiral. Couldn't find steady work. Lost his apartment. He's been on the streets with his daughter for almost 3 years now." Richards closed the folder. "He's managed to keep Lily in school somehow, moving between shelters and temporary housing. The girls never miss more than a few days of classes." Harper stood abruptly, walking back to the window. The city below blurred through unexpected tears. Ethan was alive. The man she'd mourned, the love she'd tried so hard to forget. He was alive and had been suffering just blocks from her office. "Does he?" She swallowed hard. "Does he remember me?" The medical records suggest his memory returned completely during his recovery. Richard's voice was gentle. "He remembers everything, Miss Sterling." The implication hit her like a physical blow. He remembered her, yet he'd chosen to stay away. He'd gotten married, had a child, lost everything, and never reached out. "That will be all, Thomas. Thank you." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. After Richards left, Harper remained at the window, memories flooding back. Ethan's laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. His strong, capable hands working wood into beautiful shapes. The night he proposed under a sky full of stars, promising to build them a home filled with love and handcrafted furniture. Her hand pressed against her stomach, remembering the baby she'd lost in her grief after his disappearance. The doctors had called it a miscarriage, but Harper had always felt it was her broken heart that couldn't sustain the tiny life they'd created. The intercom buzzed again. "Miss Sterling?" The board meeting starts in 15 minutes. Harper didn't respond. She stood frozen at her desk, her heart pounding against her ribs. Ethan was alive. The truth of it overwhelmed her, filling her with a confusion of emotions: joy, anger, relief, betrayal. The man she'd loved enough to marry was sleeping on cardboard outside her building with his young daughter. Questions swirled in her mind like autumn leaves in a storm. Why hadn't he come to her when he recovered? Why had he let her believe he was dead? What had happened to the brave, confident man who had once promised to love her forever? Her fingers brushed against the surface of her desk, touching the folder Richards had left behind. Inside were the answers to 13 years of questions, but they only led to more questions. The man sleeping on the streets wasn't just a homeless father. He was her Ethan, the one person she'd never truly gotten over. The magnitude of this revelation left her rooted to the spot, her carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. Everything she thought she knew about her past, about loss and love and moving on, had just been rewritten in the span of a single conversation. Harper sat on a weathered wooden bench in Grant Park, her designer coat pulled tight against the November chill. The carefully manicured paths stretched before her, lined with trees that had shed most of their leaves. A few determined joggers passed by, their breath visible in the cold air. She checked her phone again. 12:15 p.m. Ethan would be here soon. She'd asked him to meet her during his lunch break, away from the corporate scrutiny of her building. Here, among the bare trees and scattered leaves, she hoped he might feel more comfortable speaking truthfully. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Ethan walked toward her, his shoulders hunched against the cold in his worn work jacket. Even now, seeing him sent a jolt through her heart. The same crooked smile, the same gentle eyes, though now shadowed by years of hardship. "Thanks for meeting me," Harper said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She gestured to the empty space beside her on the bench. Ethan sat down, leaving a careful distance between them. His hands were rough from years of manual labor, and he rubbed them together for warmth. "Miss Sterling, please." She cut him off. "Call me Harper. You know why I asked you here." The wind rustled through the remaining leaves above them. A young mother pushed a stroller past, her baby bundled against the cold. Harper watched Ethan's eyes follow them, probably thinking of Lily. "Why did you leave me?" Harper asked, the words she'd held back for 13 years finally breaking free. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion behind her professional facade. Ethan's shoulders sagged. He stared at his worn boots, unable to meet her gaze. "After the accident," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "the doctors, they told me I wouldn't make it. Said I had maybe 6 months. He swallowed hard. "I couldn't bear the thought of you watching me die. You had such a bright future ahead." Harper's hands clenched in her lap. "But you survived." "Yeah." He gave a bitter laugh. "Somehow I did, but by then." He gestured vaguely at the space between them, at the vast gulf of time and circumstance that separated the people they'd been from who they were now. "I saw your name in the papers. Rising star in the business world. I was living in a shelter, couldn't even afford my medical bills. What right did I have to come back into your life?" "That wasn't your choice to make," Harper said, her voice tight with emotion. "I mourned you. I thought you were dead." "I know." Ethan's voice was heavy with regret. "I convinced myself I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself. From facing you, from admitting how far I'd fallen." He turned to look at her finally, his eyes filled with shame. "I'm so sorry, Harper. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry." Harper sat in silence, absorbing his words. The park continued its quiet activity around them. Distant traffic, the crunch of leaves under passing feet, the call of persistent pigeons. Everything she'd imagined saying to him over the years seemed to evaporate in the face of his raw honesty. "You're right," she said finally. "It doesn't change the past." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "But maybe we can change the future." Ethan looked at her questioningly. "I want to offer you a job," Harper continued, "in the maintenance department at Sterling Innovations. It's not charity," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "We need good workers, and I've seen how you handle yourself. The position comes with benefits, including health care for you and Lily." Ethan's face showed a mix of hope and hesitation. "I don't know if I deserve." "This isn't about what you deserve," Harper interrupted. "It's about what you need." "What Lily needs." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Consider it a second chance. for both of us." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't let you down. Not again." He stood up, adjusting his jacket against the wind. "I should get back. Lily will be waiting at the shelter's after-school program." Harper watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller against the backdrop of the city skyline. Part of her wondered if this was a mistake, if mixing their past with present business would only lead to more pain. But something deeper, something in her heart that had never quite given up on him, told her this was right. The bench felt colder without him there. Harper pulled out her phone to email HR about the new hire, her fingers hovering over the keys. Around her, the park continued its daily rhythm, oblivious to the weight of the moment. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the path, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled the hour. Ethan stood in front of the gleaming glass doors of Sterling Innovations, tugging at the collar of his new navy suit. The fabric felt stiff and foreign against his skin, a stark reminder of how far he'd fallen from his old life. His reflection in the polished glass showed a man trying desperately to belong in a world that had long since moved on without him. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the revolving door. The lobby stretched before him, all marble and chrome, busy with morning traffic. Well-dressed professionals hurried past, their shoes clicking against the floor, their conversations a steady hum of purpose and direction. "Mr. Cole?" A young woman in a crisp blazer approached him. "I'm Jessica from HR. We're ready for your orientation." Ethan nodded, following her to a small conference room. His hands felt clammy as he filled out paperwork, listened to policies, and received his ID badge. The weight of the plastic card around his neck felt like both a lifeline and a burden. "The maintenance office is on the lower level," Jessica explained, leading him down a service corridor. "You'll report to Mike Henderson, our head of facilities." Mike turned out to be a burly man with kind eyes and weathered hands. He showed Ethan around the maintenance area, a maze of storage rooms, tool cabinets, and workshop spaces. "Most of our work is basic stuff," Mike explained, handing Ethan a tablet with the day's work orders. "Fixing lights, unclogging drains, handling climate control issues. But we take pride in keeping this place running smooth." Ethan's first task was replacing fluorescent tubes in a fourth-floor office. His hands remembered the work easily enough. It was simple compared to the intricate carpentry he'd once done. As he worked, he overheard two women discussing a jammed printer. "Here, let me take a look," he offered, setting aside his ladder. The older woman smiled gratefully as he cleared the paper jam and showed her how to prevent it from happening again. "Thank you," she said warmly. "I'm Margaret. I've worked here 20 years, and you're the first maintenance person who's ever explained how to fix it myself." Throughout the morning, Ethan moved from task to task. He fixed a wobbly desk leg, adjusted a sticking door, and replaced some burnout bulbs. Each interaction with the staff members reminded him of his changed status. CM, how he was now invisible in ways he'd never been before. During lunch, he sat alone in the maintenance break room, unwrapping the sandwich he'd packed. His thoughts drifted to Lily, safe at her new school, wearing new clothes Harper had insisted on buying. The guilt of accepting such charity still gnawed at him. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan looked up to find Mike standing there with his lunch container. "Of course not. You're doing good work," Mike said, settling into a chair. "The staff's already talking about how helpful you are." "Just trying to do my job," Ethan replied quietly. "Listen." Mike leaned forward, his voice kind but serious. "I don't know your story, and you don't have to tell it, but I've been doing this long enough to know when someone's carrying heavy things inside. This job, it's honest work. There's no shame in it." Ethan's throat tightened. He managed to nod, grateful when Mike changed the subject to the building's ancient boiler system. Up in her office, Harper watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Ethan worked on the courtyard lighting. Even from 12 stories up, she could see the careful way he handled his tools, the patience with which he approached each task. It was strange seeing him in a suit instead of his usual work clothes, like watching someone perform in a costume that didn't quite fit. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Sterling, your 10 o'clock is here." "Thank you, Sarah." Harper turned from the window, but her thoughts remained with the man below. She'd seen how the other employees responded to him, with surprise at his gentleness, appreciation for his thorough work. Yet there was something in the way he held himself, a hesitancy in his interactions, that spoke of deep wounds still unhealed. Throughout the day, she caught glimpses of him, helping an intern with a heavy box of files, showing a janitor how to properly repair a vacuum cleaner, carefully explaining to a secretary why her space heater was a fire hazard, and offering to find her a safer solution. Each time, she saw both who he was and who he had been, the successful businessman and skilled craftsman, now hidden beneath layers of hardship and shame. When evening came, Harper watched from her office as Ethan gathered his tools, preparing to leave for the day. His shoulders were slightly stooped, his movements betraying his exhaustion. The suit she'd given him, though well-tailored, seemed to sit uncomfortably on his frame, as if he couldn't quite reconcile this version of himself with the man he'd become. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, remembering the confident, ambitious carpenter who had once swept her off her feet with his dreams of building custom homes. That man had stood tall, his smile quick and genuine, his eyes bright with possibility. The Ethan below moved like someone carrying an invisible weight, his kindness tinged with an edge of sorrow that made her heart ache. As he walked toward the exit, he paused to help a cleaning woman with her cart, which had caught on a threshold. The simple act of kindness, performed without hesitation or expectation of recognition, brought tears to Harper's eyes. Here was the essence of the man she'd loved, still present, still giving, but wrapped in layers of pain and loss she wasn't sure how to heal. The city lights began to twinkle outside her window as dusk settled over Chicago. Harper gathered her things, her mind full of questions about the past and uncertainties about the future. She wondered if the gap between who Ethan had been and who he was now could ever truly be bridged, or if some changes left permanent marks on the soul. Still, she had seen glimpses today, in his gentle interactions, his careful work, his quiet dignity, of the man she'd once known. Perhaps he wasn't gone entirely, just buried beneath years of struggle and survival. Whether that man would ever fully return, only time would tell. Harper watched through her office window as employees streamed out of the building for lunch. Her eyes caught sight of Ethan, who sat alone on a bench in the courtyard, unwrapping what looked like a simple sandwich. The sight tugged at her heart. Making a quick decision, she grabbed her coat and headed down. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching winter. As she approached him, Ethan looked up, surprise clear on his face. "Would you like to join me for lunch?" Harper asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "There's a nice cafe just around the corner." Ethan hesitated, glancing down at his simple lunch. "I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be," Harper said softly. "Please?" Something in her tone must have convinced him because he nodded, carefully wrapping up his sandwich and standing. They walked in comfortable silence to a small cafe tucked between two towering buildings. The warm air inside smelled of fresh bread and coffee. They settled into a quiet corner booth, and Harper noticed how Ethan's eyes darted around, taking in the other patrons in their business attire. He looked down at his own suit, the one she'd given him, and straightened it self-consciously. "The French onion soup here is amazing," Harper said, hoping to ease his discomfort. "Though I have to warn you, the cheese gets everywhere." A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "Sounds dangerous." "Only for dry cleaning bills," she replied, and was rewarded with a quiet chuckle. After they ordered, Harper found herself studying his hands, strong, calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. The crescent-shaped birthmark on his left hand caught her eye again, bringing back memories of younger days. "Tell me about your carpentry," she said, genuinely curious. "What did you love most about it?" Ethan's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the weight he carried seemed to lift. "There's something special about working with wood," he said, his voice warm with passion. "Each piece has its own character, its own story. The grain, the knots, they're like nature's fingerprints." He told her about his favorite projects: a rocking chair for an expectant mother, a hope chest for a young bride, a dollhouse for a little girl who'd lost her mother. With each story, Harper saw glimpses of the man she'd known, but also someone new, someone whose hardships had carved deeper wells of compassion. "The best part was seeing their faces when the piece was finished," he said, his voice soft with remembrance. "It wasn't just about making furniture. It was about creating something that would be part of their lives, their memories." Their food arrived, and Harper watched as Ethan carefully arranged his napkin, his movements measured and precise. She remembered how he used to eat with such carefree enthusiasm in college. Now, each bite was taken with quiet gratitude. "You're still amazing with your hands," Harper said, thinking of how she'd seen him fix a stuck door in the office yesterday. "The maintenance team says you've fixed things they've been struggling with for months." Ethan shrugged, his cheeks coloring slightly. It's nothing special. Just things I've picked up over the years. Don't do that, Harper said gently. Don't diminish your skills. You've always been talented, Ethan. That hasn't changed. He looked up at her then, his eyes holding a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something that made her heart flutter. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the busy cafe fading away around them. The walk back to the office was quiet, but comfortable. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the sidewalk, and a cool breeze rustled the few remaining leaves on the trees. Harper found herself walking closer to Ethan than necessary, drawn to his warmth. As they approached the building, Ethan held the door open for her. When she passed by him, she caught him looking at her, that same soft, wondering look she remembered from years ago, the one that used to make her feel like the most precious thing in his world. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The bustling lobby, the clicking heels, the distant phone rings, it all faded away. In that brief moment, Harper felt something spark in her heart, a warmth she thought she'd lost forever. Then someone called her name, breaking the spell. But as they parted ways, Harper to her executive floor and Ethan to his maintenance duties, she could still feel the echo of that moment, that spark of connection that whispered of possibilities yet to come. The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church, painting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Harper Sterling sat in the back row, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't been to church in years, not since before Ethan disappeared. Yet here she was, drawn by some invisible force she couldn't explain. The chapel filled slowly with families dressed in their Sunday best. Harper smoothed her simple blue dress, feeling oddly out of place despite her expensive attire. She watched as people greeted each other with warm smiles and friendly waves, a sense of community she'd forgotten existed. Then she saw them. Ethan and Lily entered through a side door, both wearing modest but clean clothes. Lily's hair was tied back with a yellow ribbon, bouncing as she skipped alongside her father. Harper's breath caught in her throat. Ethan wore a plain white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and even from this distance, she could see the crescent birthmark on his left hand. They headed straight to the children's area, where a group of young kids sat in a circle on colorful mats. Harper hadn't known they volunteered here, but somehow it made perfect sense. She watched as Ethan sat cross-legged among the children, Lily beside him, as natural as breathing. The service began, but Harper barely heard the opening hymns. Her attention remained fixed on Ethan as he helped lead the children's activities. He was different here, lighter somehow, as if the weight of his past lifted within these walls. He smiled more freely, laughed more easily. When one little boy struggled with his Bible story workbook, Ethan gently guided his hand, showing infinite patience. Today's message is about grace and restoration. The pastor's voice carried through the church. Harper's attention snapped back to the main service. Sometimes, God brings people back into our lives not to relive the past, but to create something new and beautiful. The words struck Harper like a physical force. She watched as Ethan helped the children create paper chains, symbols of their lesson about forgiveness, breaking chains of guilt. His hands, once skilled at crafting fine furniture, now carefully helped tiny fingers fold and glue. The tenderness in his movements brought tears to her eyes. During a song, Lily's clear voice rose above the other children's, pure and sweet. Harper remembered how she used to sing in church herself, back when faith came easily. The familiar melody wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and she found herself humming along. After the main service ended, families lingered in the fellowship hall. Harper stood awkwardly near a table of coffee and pastries, unsure whether to approach Ethan and Lily or slip away quietly. The decision was made for her when Lily spotted her and came running over. "You came!" Lily exclaimed, her face glowing with genuine joy. "Did you see me helping with the little kids?" "Daddy says it's important to help others, even when we don't have much ourselves." Harper's heart melted at the child's earnest enthusiasm. "I did see you. You were wonderful with them." "Thank you," Lily beamed, then looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know what? I think you should come every Sunday. Then we could all be together, like a family." She reached for Harper's hand. "Would that be okay, Aunt Harper?" The words hit Harper like a wave of warmth. "Aunt Harper?" she repeated softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Is it okay if I call you that?" Lily asked, suddenly uncertain. "You feel like an aunt to me. You're nice like one, and you take care of us like family does." Harper knelt down to Lily's level, her eyes misty. "Of course you can call me that, sweetheart. I'd be honored." Ethan approached then, looking apologetic. Lily, remember what we talked about? We shouldn't assume. No, it's perfectly fine. Harper interrupted, standing up but keeping hold of Lily's hand. Really? The three of them stood there in a moment of comfortable silence, surrounded by the buzz of conversation and the scent of coffee. Harper noticed how natural it felt, how right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. After saying goodbye, Harper walked home through the crisp autumn air. Leaves crunched beneath her feet as she took the long way through the park. The morning's experience had shifted something inside her. The wall she'd built around her heart after Ethan's disappearance was crumbling, but instead of feeling vulnerable, she felt free. She stopped at a bench overlooking the duck pond, watching the water ripple in the breeze. The Ethan she'd known years ago had been ambitious, confident, perhaps a bit prideful. This new Ethan, humbled by life's hardships but somehow stronger for it, touched her heart in an entirely different way. And Lily, Harper's hand went to her chest, remembering the joy that flooded her when the little girl called her Aunt Harper. A pair of ducks glided past, perfectly in sync. Harper smiled, recognizing that same harmony in her own heart. The past was the past. What mattered now was this new chapter unfolding before her, full of possibility and hope. She was ready to turn the page. Getting up from the bench, Harper walked the rest of the way home with lighter steps. For the first time in years, she felt complete, as if she'd found something she didn't even know she was missing. The morning's grace had done more than restore her faith. It had restored her heart. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Sterling Innovations buzzed with anticipation. Morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the leather chairs where board members sat straight-backed and expectant. Harper Sterling stood at the head of the long mahogany table, her fingers trailing over the smooth surface as she studied the proposal before her. TechVision's offer is substantial, said Marcus Chin, her CFO. Their AI development could revolutionize our entire product line. The numbers speak for themselves. Harper nodded, scanning the room. Ethan sat near the back, where the maintenance staff representatives usually did during quarterly meetings. His presence was a new addition to these gatherings, her attempt at making the company more inclusive of all employee voices. 20% growth in the first year alone, continued Marcus, clicking through his presentation. Their technology would cut our production costs by 30%. And what about their labor practices? Ethan's voice was quiet but clear. The room fell silent. A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Harper's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to speak up. I'm sorry? Marcus blinked, clearly thrown off. Ethan leaned forward, his shoulders square. I've been reading about TechVision. Their overseas factories have terrible working conditions. 16-hour days, no benefits, children working the assembly lines. That's just media speculation, someone muttered. No, it's not. Ethan pulled out his phone. 3 major news outlets confirmed it last month. They're being investigated by the Labor Department. Harper watched as Ethan's words settled over the room. Gone was the hesitant maintenance worker. In his place sat a man who knew right from wrong and wasn't afraid to say it. Mr. Cole, Marcus said stiffly, while we appreciate your concern, this is a business decision. The partnership would bring tremendous value to our shareholders. At what cost? Ethan's eyes met Harper's. Isn't Sterling Innovations built on innovation that helps people? How can we help people if we're hurting them to do it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Harper felt the weight of every gaze in the room, but Ethan's was the heaviest. She saw in his eyes the same earnest conviction she'd fallen in love with years ago. The board needs time to consider all aspects of this partnership, Harper said finally. We'll reconvene next week. As people filed out, snippets of conversation floated around her. Can't let emotions cloud judgment, someone said. It's just business, said another. Harper remained in her chair, staring at the proposal. The numbers were impressive, exactly what the shareholders wanted. But Ethan's words echoed in her mind. Later that evening, in her office, Harper sat in the growing darkness. The city lights twinkled below, each one representing a life, a story. She thought about how she'd built her company from the ground up, promising herself she'd never compromise her values for profit. When had things changed? When had the bottom line become more important than people? Her phone buzzed. Another message from TechVision's CEO, pressing for an answer. The board was eager to move forward. The deal would make headlines, boost their stock price, please the shareholders. Harper walked to her window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, she could see people leaving work, heading home to their families. How many of them had she truly considered when making decisions lately? She thought of Ethan and Lily, how they'd lived on the streets. How many other families might suffer if she signed this deal? How many children might work in those factories instead of playing, learning, living their lives? Her reflection stared back at her from the window, polished, successful, powerful. But in that moment, she hardly recognized herself. The ambitious young woman who'd started this company had wanted to make the world better, not just richer. Harper's phone buzzed again. Another urgent message about the deal? She let it ring, lost in thought. The last rays of sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. In her mind, she could still see Ethan's face during the meeting, not judging, but disappointed. He'd seen something in her that she'd forgotten was there. Her assistant knocked softly on the door. "Miss Sterling, the board members are asking about the Tech Vision timeline. They want to know when you'll make the announcement." "Tell them I'm still reviewing the proposal," Harper said, not turning from the window. "But they're expecting, just tell them I'm reviewing it," Harper said more firmly. When she was alone again, Harper sank into her chair. The proposal sat on her desk, its pages filled with promises of profit and growth. But now, all she could see were the hidden costs, the human costs she'd been too busy to consider. She picked up a framed photo from her desk, one taken at the company's founding. She was younger then, eyes bright with purpose and promise. What would that version of herself think about this decision? The next few days stretched out before her like a tightrope. On one side, the safe and profitable choice that everyone expected her to make. On the other, the harder path, the one that might cost her but let her keep her soul. Harper stood up, gathering her things. She needed time to think, to remember who she was and what she really wanted her legacy to be. As she walked to the elevator, she passed the maintenance office where Ethan worked. The light was still on, and through the window, she could see him fixing an old chair, his hand steady and sure. Some things were broken in ways that money couldn't fix. Some choices, once made, changed you forever. Harper stepped into the elevator, her reflection fractured in its mirrored walls, and wondered which path she would choose, and who she would become because of it. Harper's office felt different in the early evening light. The usual sharp edges of her modern furniture seemed softer, and the cityscape beyond her windows had taken on gentle orange hues. She sat on her cream-colored couch, her blazer discarded, watching as Ethan settled into the chair across from her. "Thank you for staying late," Harper said, her voice carrying the weight of the day. She twisted her silver bracelet, a nervous habit she thought she'd outgrown. "I needed someone to talk to about this." Ethan's presence had a calming effect. He wore his maintenance uniform with the same dignity he once wore expensive suits, and his eyes held that same gentle understanding she remembered from years ago. "The deal with Tech Giant," Harper continued, running her fingers through her hair. "It would mean everything for the company. The board is pushing hard for it. The numbers are." She shook her head. "They're astronomical." "But?" Ethan asked quietly, leaning forward slightly. "But their labor practices are terrible. We've all seen the reports. 12-hour shifts, unsafe conditions, workers falling asleep at their stations." Harper stood up and walked to her window, watching the city lights flicker to life. "They treat people like machines." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "You know," he said finally, "when I was living on the streets with Lily, I learned something about human dignity. It's not something you can put a price on." Harper turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "There were days when we were so hungry, I could have stolen, could have done lots of things I'm not proud of." His voice was soft but steady. "But I knew Lily was watching. Everything I did, every choice I made, was teaching her something about right and wrong." The silence that followed felt heavy with meaning. Harper sank back onto the couch, closer to Ethan this time. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you choose the right thing when it costs you everything?" Ethan smiled, a gentle expression that reached his eyes. "I lost everything once, Harper. My business, my home, my—" He paused, looking at her meaningfully. "My future. But I never lost my integrity. That's something no one can take from you. You can only give it away." Harper felt tears prick at her eyes. "The board will fight me on this. Some of them might resign." "Probably." Ethan agreed. "But you'll be able to look in the mirror every morning. You'll be able to look at the people who work for you, really look at them, and know you're protecting their dignity too." "When did you get so wise?" Harper asked, managing a small smile. Cardboard boxes make excellent thinking spots, he replied with a slight grin, then grew serious again. Harper, I've watched you these past weeks. You're not just a CEO, you're a leader. People look up to you, trust you. That's worth more than any deal. Harper stood and walked to her desk, picking up the contract proposal. The paper felt heavy in her hands, like it was weighted with all the possibilities it represented, both good and bad. You know what's funny? She said, turning back to Ethan. A month ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have signed this without a second thought. And now? Now I remember who I wanted to be when I started this company. Someone who made a difference, not just a profit. She set the contract back down. Someone my younger self would have been proud of. Ethan stood, straightening his uniform. It's getting late. I should head home. Lily will be waiting with Mrs. Peterson. Harper nodded, watching as he headed toward the door. In his simple maintenance uniform, he carried himself with more dignity than any of the suits who'd sat in her office that day. Ethan, she called after him. He turned his hand on the doorknob. Thank you, she said softly. He gave her one last smile and left, his footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. Harper stood at her window, watching as he emerged from the building minutes later, a small figure against the gathering dusk. He paused to help an elderly woman with her shopping bags, and Harper felt something twist in her chest. The city lights blurred as she stared out into the darkness, her mind racing with possibilities and consequences. The board meeting was in 3 days. 3 days to either stand her ground or give in to the pressure. 3 days to decide what kind of leader, what kind of person she really wanted to be. She picked up the contract again, its glossy pages reflecting the city lights. The numbers were still there, still tempting, but now they seemed hollow somehow, empty of real meaning. She thought of Ethan's words about dignity, about integrity. She thought about the example she wanted to set for her employees, for herself. Harper placed the contract back on her desk, her hand lingering on its surface. The choice ahead of her was clear, even if the path wasn't. She gathered her things, switched off her office lights, and headed home, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Not with this weight on her shoulders, not with this decision looming over her. But for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. Whatever came next, whatever the cost, she knew she would face it with her integrity intact. Just like Ethan had taught her, the autumn sun streamed through the classroom windows as Lily sat at her desk, colored pencils scattered across the surface. Her small hands moved with purpose as she drew 3 stick figures on the white paper. Miss Thompson, her teacher, had asked the class to draw their families, and Lily knew exactly what she wanted to create. "That's a lovely drawing, Lily," Miss Thompson said, peering over her shoulder. "Who are these people?" Lily's face lit up with pride. "That's my daddy." She pointed to the tallest figure, "And that's Aunt Harper." She indicated the figure with long brown hair, "And that's me in the middle." The smallest figure wore a bright yellow dress and held hands with both adults. When the final bell rang, Lily carefully folded her drawing and tucked it into her backpack. Ethan waited outside in his work uniform, and her face broke into a wide smile as she ran to him. "Daddy, I made something special today." She pulled out the drawing, slightly crumpled but still bright with color. Ethan's eyes softened as he looked at the picture. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Did you want to show it to Harper?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Can we go see her now, please?" They made their way to Harper's office on the top floor of Sterling Innovations. The security guard, now familiar with their presence, gave them a friendly wave as they passed. Lily clutched her drawing tightly, practically bouncing with excitement. Harper was on the phone when they arrived, but her face brightened when she saw them. She quickly wrapped up her call and stood to greet them. "What a wonderful surprise! What brings you two up here?" "I made this for you." Lily thrust the drawing forward, her eyes shining with hope. Harper took the paper carefully, as if handling a precious document. Her breath caught as she studied the 3 figures holding hands. The simplicity of it, the pure innocence of Lily's vision, touched something deep within her. "Oh, Lily," Harper whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This is perfect. Do you really like it?" Lily asked, twisting her hands together. "I love it." Harper walked to the wall behind her desk, where various awards and certificates hung. With deliberate care, she moved aside a framed achievement award and pinned Lily's drawing in its place. "There. Now everyone can see it." Lily beamed with pride, and Ethan watched the scene with quiet joy. The drawing looked oddly right there among the symbols of corporate success, a reminder of what really mattered. "Would you both like to come over for dinner tonight?" Harper asked, her eyes meeting Ethan's briefly before returning to Lily. "I was thinking of making pasta." "Yes," Lily exclaimed before Ethan could respond. He chuckled and nodded his agreement. Later that evening, Harper's apartment felt warmer than usual. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the air as Lily helped set the table, carefully placing each fork just so. Ethan stood in the kitchen, showing Harper how to properly cook the pasta al dente. "You're stirring it too hard," he said gently, placing his hand over hers to demonstrate, "like this, gentle circles." The touch sent a familiar warmth through Harper's body, and she found herself leaning slightly closer to him. The moment felt domestic, natural, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. After dinner, they settled onto Harper's plush couch. Lily sat between them, her head resting against Harper's arm as she described her day at school. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, but Harper barely noticed them. Her attention was fixed on the two people beside her. Ethan's gentle smile as he listened to his daughter, the way Lily's hands moved animatedly as she spoke, the comfortable warmth of their presence. This was what she'd been missing all these years, she realized. Not the success or the accolades that lined her office walls, but this simple moment of connection. The drawing Lily had made captured something profound in its childlike simplicity, the possibility of wholeness, of family. Lily's voice grew softer as she fought sleep, her words becoming mumbled. Ethan scooped her up gently, cradling her against his chest like he had done countless times before. The gesture was so natural, so full of love, that Harper felt her heart constrict. "I should get her home," Ethan whispered, careful not to wake Lily. Harper nodded, walking them to the door. As she watched them leave, Lily, sleeping peacefully in her father's arms, she felt a certainty settle over her. The tech deal, with all its ethical complications, seemed suddenly clear. She knew what she had to do. But for now, she simply stood in her doorway, watching father and daughter disappear down the hallway, her heart full of a feeling she thought she'd lost forever, the feeling of family. Through the window, the city stretched out below, its lights twinkling like stars. But Harper's gaze was drawn to the reflection in the glass, her own face, softer now, transformed by the evening's simple joy. The memory of Lily's drawing, hanging proudly in her office, brought a smile to her lips. Sometimes the most important things in life came in the form of crayon stick figures and quiet evening moments. Harper's hands trembled as she held the manila envelope her private investigator had just delivered. The weight of it felt like lead in her grasp. She sat behind her desk, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished surface, and took a deep breath before opening it. The first document was a birth certificate, Lily's birth certificate. Harper's eyes scanned the page, her heart thundering in her chest. The date matched, the hospital matched. But what made her blood run cold was the small notation at the bottom, Mother, Harper, Sterling. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself. But her investigator, David Chin, stood quietly by the window, his expression grave. "There's more," he said softly. "Keep reading." The next document was a hospital record, detailing a mix-up in the nursery during a particularly chaotic night. 2 babies, both premature, both with similar timestamps. One was recorded as stillborn, the child Harper had mourned for 13 years. The other was given to Ethan Cole, who had been unconscious in the ICU at the time. "The hospital covered it up," David explained, his voice careful and measured. "They discovered the mistake years later during an internal audit, but by then, you had already moved on, and Mr. Cole had disappeared with the child." Harper's vision blurred with tears. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the papers. "All this time," she whispered, "all this time, she was mine?" Memories flooded her mind, Lily's smile so similar to her own. The way the little girl's eyes crinkled when she laughed, just like Harper's mother's had. Even her mannerisms, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking hard about something. "I've arranged for DNA testing to confirm," David added gently, "but the documentation is quite clear. Lily Cole is your biological daughter." Harper stood abruptly, her chair rolling back against the wall with a thud. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city continued its endless dance of traffic and pedestrians, unaware that her world had just shattered and reformed into something entirely new. "Does Ethan know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No evidence suggests he was ever informed. According to the records, he was in critical condition when the baby was brought to him. His sister signed most of the paperwork. Harper's mind raced back to their recent conversations, all the times Ethan had spoken about Lily's birth. He had always been vague about the details, attributing it to the trauma of his accident and the painful memories of that time. "Get me everything," she demanded, turning back to David. "Every record, every detail, every person involved. I need to know exactly what happened. It's all in there." David gestured to the envelope, including statements from former hospital staff who were present that night. Harper sank back into her chair, pulling out more documents. For the next hour, she read through everything: medical records, staff statements, internal hospital memos. The truth emerged like a photograph developing in dark room. 2 babies, 2 families, 1 terrible mistake, and years of lives built on that foundation of error. Finally, she could take no more. She needed to confront Ethan, needed to hear his side of the story. She picked up her phone and sent him a text. "Meet me in my office. Now, it's important." While she waited, Harper paced the length of her office, the city sprawling out below her. Her mind kept returning to Lily's drawing, still pinned proudly on her wall, the 3 stick figures holding hands. Had some part of Lily known? Had some deep, instinctive part of her recognized the truth? The knock on her door made her jump. Ethan entered, looking concerned. "Harper, what's wrong?" She turned to face him, clutching the birth certificate in her hand. "Tell me about the day Lily was born," she demanded, her voice shaking. Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. "You know, I don't remember much. I was in the ICU." "Try harder," Harper interrupted, stepping closer. "Tell me everything you do remember." I was in and out of consciousness," he said slowly. "There was the accident, and then nothing clear for days. When I finally came to, my sister told me the baby had been born. They brought her to me, but I was so heavily medicated." He trailed off, his eyes growing distant with the memory. Harper thrust the birth certificate toward him. "Look at this. Really look at it." Ethan took the paper, his eyes scanning the document. She watched as confusion gave way to shock, then disbelief. His face went pale. This can't be right," he stammered, looking up at her with wide eyes. "This says you're Lily's mother." Harper finished for him. "The hospital made a mistake. Ethan, the baby you were told was yours. She was mine, our daughter, the one I thought I'd lost." Ethan staggered backward, groping for a chair. He collapsed into it, the paper trembling in his hands. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't possible. I raised her. I've been there for every moment of her life." "I'm not saying you haven't," Harper said, her voice softening slightly. "But look at the evidence. The hospital records, the staff statements, it's all there. They switched the babies, Ethan. They gave you my daughter and told me mine had died." "I never knew," he said, his voice breaking. "Harper, you have to believe me. I never knew she was yours. I would have told you. I would have." "Would you have?" Harper demanded, her own pain bleeding into her words. "You disappeared without a word. You let me think you were dead. Because I thought I had nothing left to offer you." Ethan exploded, standing up. "I was broken, penniless, barely able to take care of myself. And then they brought me this perfect, tiny baby, and she became my whole world. She was all I had left." They stood facing each other, both breathing heavily, both devastated by the weight of this revelation. Harper watched as tears began to roll down Ethan's cheeks. "I love her," he said simply, his voice raw. "She's my daughter. Maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters. I've loved her every day of her life." Harper felt her anger crumbling in the face of his obvious pain. "I know you do," she whispered. "I've seen it. But Ethan, she's my daughter too. My baby, the one I mourned for 13 years. Ethan sank back into the chair, running his hands through his hair in distress. "What do we do now?" he asked, looking up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "How do we tell her? How do we explain this?" Harper shook her head, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. "I don't know," she admitted. "I honestly don't know." Harper stared out her office window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Chicago. The DNA test results lay scattered across her desk, each page a stark reminder of the truth she was struggling to process. Lily wasn't just any child, she was her daughter, their daughter. Her fingers traced the edge of Lily's birth certificate, a document that now felt both familiar and foreign. The memory of that terrible day 13 years ago, when she thought she had lost everything, both Ethan and their unborn child, came rushing back with brutal clarity. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Come in," she said, quickly composing herself. Ethan stepped inside, still in his maintenance uniform. His face showed concern, probably noticing her absence during their usual lunch break. "Harper, is everything okay? You weren't at. How could you not tell me?" Harper's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Tell you what?" Harper picked up the DNA results, her hand shaking. "About Lily, about who she really is." Confusion crossed Ethan's face. "I don't understand." "She's mine, Ethan. Our daughter, the baby I thought I lost." Harper's voice cracked. "The hospital switched records. She survived. And you never told me?" The color drained from Ethan's face as he processed her words. He stumbled backward, reaching for the wall to steady himself. "What? That's impossible." "Is it?" Harper stood up, anger and hurt mixing in her chest. "You disappear after the accident, raise our daughter alone, and then just happen to show up outside my building? Were you planning this all along?" "No." Ethan's voice was raw with emotion. "Harper, I swear to you, I had no idea. The woman I was with. She left shortly after Lily was born. I raised her alone because I thought she was mine from another relationship." Harper paced behind her desk, 13 years of pain and loss bubbling to the surface. "Do you know what it did to me, thinking I'd lost both of you? I mourned our baby, Ethan. I mourned you. And I've regretted leaving every day since," Ethan said quietly. "But I never knew about Lily being yours. How could I?" Harper stopped pacing, studying his face for any sign of deception. All she saw was the same raw honesty she'd always known in him, but now it wasn't enough to quiet her doubts. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said, sinking back into her chair. "Every time I think I understand what happened, there's another layer of lies and mistakes." "They weren't lies, Harper." Ethan took a tentative step forward. "I was broken after the accident. I thought I'd never recover, never be the man you deserved. I couldn't bear to let you watch me waste away, so I left. It was wrong, but it wasn't a lie." "And Lily?" Harper's voice softened at her daughter's name. "She's been my whole world," Ethan said, his eyes filling with tears. "Everything I've done has been for her. If I had known." His voice trailed off. Harper turned back to the window, unable to look at him. "I need time, Ethan. It's too much." "I understand." His voice was heavy with resignation. "But please know that I never meant to hurt you. Not then and not now." She heard him move toward the door, his footsteps hesitant. "Harper?" She didn't turn around. "Whatever you decide, whatever you believe about me, know that Lily deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know her mother." The door closed softly behind him, leaving Harper alone with her thoughts and the weight of a truth she never expected to discover. She picked up the photo of Lily from her desk, the one taken at the Christmas fair just last week. The girl's smile, so bright and innocent, now held new meaning. How had she not seen it before? The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, they were Harper's own features looking back at her. Tears fell onto the glass of the photo frame as Harper hugged it to her chest. All these years, she'd built walls around her heart to protect herself from the pain of loss. Now those same walls were crumbling, and she didn't know if she was strong enough to face what lay beyond them. The city lights blurred through her tears as night settled over Chicago. Somewhere out there, her daughter was probably getting ready for bed, unaware that her whole world was about to change. Harper pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, feeling more alone than she had in years. In the reflection, she could see Lily's drawing still pinned to her bulletin board, the one of their family. The simple crayon figures seemed to mock her now, a child's innocent wish for something that had been true all along. Harper wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the weight of the choice before her. Could she trust Ethan again? Could she open her heart not just to him, but to the daughter she never knew she had? The questions swirled in her mind like the first snowflakes beginning to fall outside her window, each one carrying the potential to change everything. The morning newspaper hit Harper's desk with a sickening thud. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Sterling Innovations CEO Deceived, Homeless Conman's Ultimate Score." Below it was a grainy photo of Ethan and Lily from their days on the street, alongside a more recent picture of him entering Sterling Tower in his maintenance uniform. Harper's hands trembled as she read the article. The journalist had twisted everything, painting Ethan as a manipulative fraud who had wormed his way into her company and her life. They'd even dug up old photos from their engagement 13 years ago, comparing them to his current state. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Board members, shareholders, and reporters all demanded answers. The stock was already dropping, and social media was ablaze with speculation. "Miss Sterling?" Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting." Harper pressed her fingers to her temples. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. She stood by her window, watching the growing crowd of reporters gathering outside the building's entrance. Her carefully built world was crumbling, and the worst part was that she couldn't entirely blame the press. She had let her guard down, allowed her heart to lead instead of her head. The board meeting was brutal. Faces lined with concern and barely concealed anger stared back at her as she tried to explain the situation. "This is a PR nightmare," Johnson, the head of marketing, declared. "Our reputation, I'm handling it," Harper cut in, her voice sharp. "By handling it, do you mean continuing to harbor a man who deceived you?" another board member asked. "The optics are terrible, Harper. The public sees a CEO being manipulated by a homeless man with a sob story." The words stung, but Harper maintained her composure. "Ethan Cole was my fiancé 13 years ago. He didn't deceive anyone about his identity." "That makes it worse," Johnson exploded. "Personal involvement with an employee? The shareholders will have a field day with this." Back in her office, Harper paced, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The situation felt surreal. Just days ago, she had discovered Lily was her daughter, and now this. It was too much, too fast. Security called to inform her that Ethan was in the lobby. Harper's heart clenched. She knew what she had to do, even though every fiber of her being screamed against it. "Send him up," she said, her voice hollow. When Ethan entered her office, his face was drawn and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept, and his maintenance uniform was wrinkled as if he'd been wearing it for days. "I saw the article," he said quietly. Harper couldn't look at him. "It's everywhere." "I'm sorry, Harper. I never meant for any of this to happen." His voice cracked. "I should have told you who I was that first day." "Yes, you should have." The words came out harsher than she intended. "Do you understand what this means for the company? For me?" Ethan stepped closer, but Harper raised her hand to stop him. "The board is demanding action. The shareholders are panicking. Everything I've built is at risk." The first snowflakes of winter drifted down from a steel-gray sky as Harper Sterling stood outside her office building, clutching her wool coat tighter around her shoulders. The city stretched before her like a maze of concrete and glass, and somewhere in that labyrinth were Ethan and Lily. She had spent the morning calling every shelter in Chicago, her voice growing more desperate with each call. The memory of their last conversation haunted her, the hurt in his eyes, the way his shoulders had slumped in defeat when the scandal broke. "Miss Sterling?" Her assistant hurried toward her with a stack of papers. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting to address the situation." Harper shook her head. "Cancel it. Cancel everything." The assistant's eyes widened. "But ma'am, everything can wait," Harper said firmly. She pulled out her phone and pulled up a map of local shelters. 3 down, 12 to go. The first shelter was a converted church basement on the south side. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of coffee and soup. A volunteer at the front desk recognized Ethan's photo but hadn't seen him in days. "He was one of our regulars before he got that job," the woman said, her eyes kind. "Such a good man, always helping others, even when he had nothing himself." Harper's throat tightened. That was the Ethan she knew, the one who would give his last dollar to someone who needed it more. The second shelter was smaller, tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store. No sign of Ethan or Lily, but an elderly man remembered them. "The little girl with the angel voice?" he asked. "She used to sing hymns here on Sundays. Brought light to this dark place." She did. The snow was falling harder now, coating the city in white. Harper's feet ached in her expensive boots as she trudged through slush-filled streets. Her driver had offered to take her, but this felt like something she needed to do on foot to really see the world Ethan had lived in. At the third shelter, a teenage volunteer mentioned seeing them yesterday. They didn't stay, though, said something about heading west. Harper's heart leaped, a direction, at least. She pushed on, checking every shelter, every soup kitchen, every place she could think of. The elegant CEO who once commanded boardrooms now stood in line at homeless outreach centers, showing Ethan's picture to anyone who would look. Hours passed. The temperature dropped. Harper's perfectly styled hair was now damp with snow, her makeup long since wiped away. None of that mattered anymore. As darkness fell, she found herself in front of street. Michael's mission, a small shelter she'd almost missed. It was little more than a converted storefront, with steamy windows and a flickering open sign. The moment she stepped inside, she heard it. A soft, clear voice singing Amazing Grace. Lily's voice. Harper followed the sound to a back room where cots were lined up in neat rows. There, in the corner, sat Lily, holding her father's hand and singing softly. Ethan lay on a thin mattress, his face flushed with fever, his breathing labored and rough. "Aunt Harper!" Lily cried out, jumping up and running to her. The little girl threw her arms around Harper's waist, and Harper held her close, feeling the trembling in her small frame. "Daddy's really sick," Lily whispered. "He started coughing yesterday, and now he won't wake up properly." Harper rushed to Ethan's side, her heart pounding. His skin burned with fever, and his chest rattled with each breath. Even in his semi-conscious state, his hand still gripped a small wooden cross. "How long has he been like this?" Harper asked, pressing her cool hand to his forehead. "Since this morning," Lily said, her voice small. "I tried to get him to go to the doctor, but he said we couldn't afford it. So I just stayed with him and prayed." Harper was already pulling out her phone, dialing 911. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," she told Lily, pulling the girl close with her free arm. "We're going to take care of your daddy." The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they loaded Ethan onto a stretcher, his eyes fluttered open briefly. "Harper?" he mumbled, reaching for her hand. She caught his fingers, squeezing gently. "I'm here, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere." In the ambulance, Lily curled up against Harper's side while the paramedics worked on Ethan. Through the windows, Chicago's lights blurred past in a kaleidoscope of color, the snow creating halos around each street lamp. "I knew you'd find us," Lily said softly. "I asked God to send you, and he did." Harper pulled her closer, watching Ethan's chest rise and fall with each labored breath. The paramedic called out vital signs that sounded too low, too weak, but Harper forced herself to stay calm for Lily's sake. The ambulance siren wailed through the snowy night, carrying its precious cargo toward hope and healing. Harper held tight to both Lily's hand and Ethan's, forming a chain that she vowed would never be broken again. The steady beep of hospital monitors filled the stark white room. Harper sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair beside Ethan's bed, her hand resting near his but not quite touching. The pneumonia had taken a harsh toll on his body, leaving him pale and weak against the crisp hospital sheets. Lily was asleep on a small couch in the corner, wrapped in Harper's cashmere coat. Dark circles shadowed the little girl's eyes. She had refused to leave her father's side for the past 2 days. Harper watched Ethan's chest rise and fall, each breath a reminder of how close she'd come to losing him again. The guilt pressed heavy on her heart. She should have looked harder, faster, should have known he'd go back to the streets rather than risk hurting her reputation. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded his face before recognition dawned. "Harper?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "I'm here," she said softly, finally letting her fingers brush against his. "How are you feeling?" He tried to sit up, but winced, like I got hit by a truck. His eyes darted to Lily's sleeping form. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. Tired, but fine." Harper's throat tightened. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I should have." "No," he interrupted, his hand weakly gripping hers. "I'm the one who ran. Again. Some habits are hard to break, I guess." Silence stretched between them, filled with years of unspoken words and buried pain. Harper took a deep breath. "Why did you leave that night? After the scandal broke?" Ethan's eyes grew distant. "I saw everything you'd built, everything you'd achieved. That article, it was going to destroy it all. Because of me." He coughed, and Harper quickly helped him sip some water. "I couldn't let that happen." "Not again." "But it wasn't your choice to make," Harper said, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't get to decide what's best for me anymore, Ethan. We're not kids anymore." He nodded slowly. "I know. I've spent so long trying to protect Lily from my mistakes, trying to be worthy of her love," his voice cracked. "And then you came back into our lives, and suddenly I had so much more to lose." Harper's eyes welled with tears. "Do you remember what you told me the day you proposed? You said love isn't about being worthy, it's about being willing to try, every single day." "I remember," he whispered. "Then why won't you let me try with you?" She wiped her eyes. I've changed too, Ethan. The woman you knew, the one who cared more about status and success than anything else, she's gone. Meeting you again, seeing how you've raised Lily with such love despite everything, it reminded me of who I used to be, who I want to be again. Ethan's eyes softened. You're already that person, Harper. You always were. I see it in the way you look at Lily, the way you fought to help us. Then trust me enough to stay, she pleaded. Trust me enough to face whatever comes next together. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of the scandal or what people might say. I'm scared of hoping again, of believing we could have a second chance. We already do, Harper said firmly. Every morning I wake up knowing you're alive, knowing Lily is safe. That's our second chance. We just have to be brave enough to take it. A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. When did you get so wise? Probably around the same time you learned how to be so selfless, she replied, matching his smile. Though I wish you'd be a little more selfish sometimes, especially when it comes to taking care of yourself. I'll work on that, he promised. Harper stood, stretching her stiff muscles, then leaned down to press a gentle kiss to his forehead. Get some rest. I'll be here when you wake up. Harper? His voice stopped her as she started to move away. I'm sorry, for everything. For leaving back then, for not telling you about Lily, for running away again. She turned back to him, her heart full of forgiveness and hope. I know, and I forgive you, Ethan. I forgave you a long time ago. His eyes were already drooping, exhaustion pulling him back under. But his fingers tightened around hers one last time, and she saw in his face the same peace she felt in her heart. As Ethan drifted off to sleep, Harper settled back in her chair, still holding his hand. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. On the small couch, Lily stirred and mumbled something in her sleep. Harper smiled, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together, not as broken pieces of the past, but as a family building something new and beautiful from the fragments of what was lost. The winter sunlight streamed through the shelter's windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Ethan walked slowly beside Harper, his steps still careful but steady. 2 weeks of recovery had brought color back to his face, though he wasn't quite at full strength. This used to be my refuge, Ethan said softly, running his hand along a scratched dining table. The volunteers here, they treated us like family, not charity cases. Harper watched him, noting how his shoulders had straightened since leaving the hospital. Gone was the perpetual hunch of shame he'd carried for so long. Tell me more about what helped you here, she said. Ethan gestured to a small corner where children's drawings decorated the walls. See that art station? Lily would spend hours there while I looked for work. Miss Sarah, the coordinator, she'd help her with homework. His voice grew thick with emotion. They gave us dignity when we had nothing else. Harper touched his arm gently. That's exactly what we need to build, a place that offers more than just shelter. They moved through the building, passing mothers with young children, elderly men reading newspapers, and teenagers doing homework. Each person they passed nodded at Ethan with recognition and respect. The hardest part wasn't being homeless. Ethan continued, pausing to help a young boy pick up some scattered crayons. It was feeling invisible, like we didn't matter to anyone. Harper watched him interact with the child, her heart swelling. This was the man she'd fallen in love with twice, kind, genuine, unafraid to show compassion. I've been thinking, she said as they reached a quiet corner. The old Wilson building downtown, it's perfect. 3 floors, kitchen facilities, plenty of space for classrooms and workshops. Ethan's eyes lit up. Workshops would be incredible, teaching people trades, helping them find work. He stopped, emotion catching in his throat. Sorry, it's just, this means everything to me. To me too, Harper replied softly. I've spent years chasing corporate success, but this, she gestured around them. This is real change. They found themselves in the shelter's small library, where mismatched chairs created cozy reading nooks. Ethan sank into one, still needing occasional rest. Harper pulled up another chair beside him. We could have job training programs, she continued, her business mind already planning. Childcare services, counseling, financial literacy classes, and a woodworking shop, Ethan added, a smile playing at his lips. I could teach carpentry. Harper reached for her tablet, pulling up the building plans she'd already started drafting. Look here, this space could work for that. We'd need proper ventilation, safety equipment. They bent their heads together over the screen, their earlier awkwardness forgotten in their shared vision. Ethan pointed out practical considerations while Harper made notes, their expertise, complementing each other perfectly. You know what this place needs most, though? Ethan asked after a while. Heart. People who understand because they've been there. Harper looked up at him, seeing the passion in his eyes. That's why I need you to help run it. Not just the woodworking, everything. You know what these families need better than anyone. Ethan stared at her, surprise evident on his face. You trust me with that? I trust you with everything, Harper said simply. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. A comfortable silence fell as they continued working, sketching out their dreams for the center. Outside, the afternoon sun painted the room in warm gold. Harper noticed how it caught the silver threading through Ethan's temples, evidence of the hard years that had shaped him. We should call it the Lily House, Harper suggested softly. Because she brought us back together. Because she represents hope. Ethan's eyes glistened. She'd love that. She already thinks you hung the moon, you know. She's ours, Harper whispered, still amazed by this truth. All this time, she was ours. She was always meant to bring us back together, Ethan said, his voice gentle. I see that now. They worked for another hour, planning and dreaming, their shoulders touching as they leaned over the tablet. The ease between them felt like coming home after a long journey. Finally, Ethan set down his pen and turned to face Harper fully. Thank you, he said simply. Not just for this project, but for believing in me again. For giving me a chance to be the man I always wanted to be. Harper met his gaze, seeing in it all the love and strength that had drawn her to him years ago. Without hesitation, she reached for his hand, the one with the crescent birthmark that had first caught her eye that cold morning. This time, when their fingers intertwined, there was no barrier between them. No shame, no guilt, no secrets. Just love, pure and hard-won. Stronger for having been tested by time and trial. In that moment, surrounded by the hopes and dreams they'd sketched out together, they were no longer CEO and maintenance worker, or even lost lovers reunited. They were simply Harper and Ethan, ready to build something beautiful together. The morning sun cast long shadows through the empty windows of what would soon become the Lily House. Ethan stood in the center of the vast space, his work boots leaving footprints in the construction dust, as he gestured at the architectural plans spread across a makeshift table. His voice carried a quiet confidence that Harper hadn't heard since their college days. If we move this support beam here, Ethan traced his finger along the blueprint, we can open up the common area, make it feel more like a home than an institution. His eyes lit up as he spoke, and Harper found herself drawn to his enthusiasm. The architect, a middle-aged woman named Grace, nodded approvingly. That could work. The structural integrity wouldn't be compromised, and it would create a more welcoming atmosphere. Harper watched from a few feet away, her heart swelling with pride. This was a different Ethan from the man she'd found sleeping on cardboard just months ago. His expertise in carpentry hadn't faded during his years on the streets. If anything, his experiences had given him unique insight into what families like his truly needed. And here, Ethan continued, pointing to another section of the plans. We should add more windows. Natural light makes such a difference when you're trying to keep your spirits up. The architect made notes on her tablet while Harper stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. He looked up at her touch, his eyes soft with gratitude. What do you think? He asked, seeking her approval, even though they both knew she trusted his judgment completely. I think it's perfect, Harper replied, studying the plans. You're thinking of everything they'll need. The construction site bustled around them as workers carried materials and took measurements. The old warehouse was slowly transforming into something new, something hopeful. Harper remembered the day she'd first proposed the idea to her board of directors, converting one of Sterling Innovations' unused properties into a shelter for single parents, rebuilding their lives. Ethan walked over to one of the half-finished walls, running his hand along the fresh drywall. We'll need to make sure the children's area is visible from the main space, he said thoughtfully. Parents need to be able to keep an eye on their kids while they're working on job applications or taking classes. Harper nodded, remembering how Ethan had always kept Lily close during their time on the streets. The memory no longer brought pain. Instead, it fueled their shared mission to help others avoid the same struggles. The computer lab will be right here, Harper added, moving to stand beside him. with clear sightlines to both the playground and the study area. Grace made a few more adjustments to the plans. "You two make quite a team," she observed with a knowing smile. It's rare to see clients so invested in the details. Ethan and Harper exchanged a glance, years of shared history passing between them in that single moment. "We've been on both sides," Ethan said simply. The morning passed quickly as they finalized details and discussed timelines. Ethan's practical experience complemented Harper's business acumen perfectly. Where she saw budgets and logistics, he saw the human element, the small touches that would make the Lily House feel like a true sanctuary. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Grace packed up her materials and headed out, leaving Ethan and Harper alone in what would become the main entrance. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, creating patterns on the dusty floor. "I still can't believe this is happening," Ethan said softly, looking around the space with wonder in his eyes. "Sometimes I think I'll wake up back on that cardboard mat, and all of this will have been a dream." Harper reached for his hand, her fingers finding the familiar crescent-shaped birthmark. "It's real," she assured him. "We're real." They walked together toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Construction would begin in earnest next week, transforming their vision into reality. Harper could already imagine the lives that would be changed within these walls. Ethan stopped just outside the building, turning to face Harper as he stuffed his hands into his pockets. The gesture was so familiar, something he'd always done when feeling vulnerable, that it made her heart ache with tenderness. "I never thought I'd be here again with you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Harper smiled warmly, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. There were no more secrets between them, no more shame or regret. Just love, understanding, and a shared purpose that felt bigger than both of them. Looking at Ethan now, she saw not just the man she'd lost and found again, but someone new, someone who had been shaped by hardship into something stronger and more beautiful. Like a piece of furniture he might have restored, the broken places had been carefully mended, making the whole more precious for having been rebuilt. The construction site hummed with activity behind them, a promise of new beginnings taking shape in steel and concrete. But the real transformation had already happened in their hearts, healing what had once seemed irreparably broken. The December morning sparkled with fresh snow as crowds gathered outside the newly renovated building. The Lily House stood proudly against the Chicago skyline, its red brick facade restored to its former glory. Christmas wreaths decorated the entrance, and a large red ribbon stretched across the double doors. Harper adjusted Lily's coat, making sure the 8-year-old was warm enough in the winter chill. "Are you ready for your big moment, sweetheart?" Lily bounced on her toes, her eyes fixed on the giant ceremonial scissors that lay waiting on a nearby table. "I can't wait. Do you think I can cut the ribbon all by myself?" "We'll help you," Ethan said, ruffling her hair. He wore a crisp navy suit, a far cry from the tattered clothes he'd worn just months ago. His eyes were bright with pride as he surveyed the building that would become a sanctuary for families like his had once been. The crowd of supporters, volunteers, and media grew larger. Local politicians mingled with community leaders, all gathered to witness the opening of Chicago's newest homeless shelter and family resource center. Harper recognized many faces from her corporate world, but today they weren't here for business deals. They were here to support something much more meaningful. Mayor Richardson approached their little family, extending her hand. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Cole, this is truly remarkable. The city cannot thank you enough for this initiative." "It's been a community effort," Harper replied, her voice warm. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded in agreement. Sometimes the best solutions come from those who understand the problem firsthand. The ceremony began as the winter sun climbed higher. Harper took her place at the podium, her breath visible in the cold air. The crowd fell silent. "Welcome, everyone. Today marks not just the opening of a building, but the beginning of a new chapter for our city." She paused, her eyes finding Ethan's in the crowd. "The Lily House represents something I learned through personal experience, that sometimes our greatest challenges can lead to our most meaningful purposes." From his spot near the ribbon, Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. He remembered those cold nights on the streets, holding Lily close, never imagining that their struggle would lead to this moment. "This center," Harper continued, "will provide emergency shelter for families in crisis, job training programs, child care services, and most importantly, hope, because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their lives with dignity." Lily squeezed her father's hand, looking up at him with understanding beyond her years. She knew their story was woven into every brick of this building. After the speeches concluded, it was time for the ribbon cutting. Harper beckoned Ethan and Lily forward. Together, they approached the large red ribbon stretching across the entrance. "Ready?" Harper asked, helping Lily position the oversized scissors. "Ready?" Lily declared, grinning as both Harper and Ethan placed their hands over hers on the scissors handles. The crowd counted down. 3, 2, 1. With a satisfying snip, the ribbon fell away. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd, and cameras flashed to capture the moment. Lily beamed with pride, and Ethan wrapped an arm around both her and Harper, pulling them close. The doors opened, and the first tour groups began to file inside. The interior had been transformed from its previous corporate sterility into a warm, welcoming space. The common area Ethan had redesigned featured comfortable seating areas, a play space for children, and natural light streaming through large windows. As families and community members explored the facility, Harper led small groups through the various sections: the dormitory-style rooms for emergency shelter, the classroom spaces for adult education, the fully equipped kitchen where cooking classes would be held, and the child care center where parents could leave their children while attending job interviews or training programs. Ethan followed along, occasionally adding details about the construction and design choices. His expertise as a carpenter had shaped every aspect of the renovation, ensuring the space was both beautiful and functional. Near the end, time of the tour, they reached the workshop area, a space where residents could learn trades like carpentry, plumbing, and electrical work. Ethan's eyes lit up as he explained the program he would be leading. "This is where we'll help people rebuild their skills along with their lives," he said, running his hand along a newly installed workbench. "Sometimes all someone needs is a chance to learn, to create, to feel productive again." As the afternoon wore on and the crowds began to thin, the first actual families seeking shelter arrived. Harper watched as intake counselors welcomed them with warmth and respect, guiding them through the registration process. Standing in the newly furnished common room, Ethan turned to Harper. His eyes were soft with emotion as he took in the scene. Children already playing in the designated area, parents speaking with social workers, volunteers organizing donations. "This is everything I've dreamed of," he said quietly, his voice thick with feeling, "and more." Harper smiled, understanding all the layers of meaning in his words. This wasn't just about the building or the program, it was about redemption, about turning their own painful past into purpose. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The sun began to set outside the tall windows, casting a golden glow across the room. Lily sat at a table nearby, already making friends with some of the children who had arrived. Her laughter mixed with theirs, filling the space with hope. They watched as more families entered, carrying what few possessions they owned, but finding something precious here. A chance to start again, just as Ethan and Harper had done. The winter sunlight streamed through the windows of Harper's office, casting a warm glow over the scattered papers and architectural plans spread across her desk. Ethan sat beside her, his sleeves rolled up, a pencil tucked behind his ear, as he studied the blueprint for the Lily House's new educational wing. "What if we move the computer lab here?" Harper suggested, pointing to a space on the plans. "It would be closer to the childcare area. Parents could take classes while their kids are just down the hall." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That makes sense. We could even add a viewing window so parents can check on their little ones during breaks." He sketched the modification with practiced ease, his carpenter's eye catching details others might miss. Harper watched him work, struck by how natural this felt. The two of them, side by side, building something meaningful together. The tension that had once existed between them had mellowed into comfortable companionship. "Remember when you first started working in maintenance?" she asked, a small smile playing at her lips. "You wouldn't even look me in the eye." Ethan chuckled, setting down his pencil. "I was terrified you'd see right through me. Turns out you did anyway." "I saw you," Harper said softly. "The real you. The man who helped others, even when he had nothing himself." A comfortable silence fell between them as they continued working. Outside, the city hummed with afternoon traffic, but their office felt like a peaceful sanctuary. Lily's latest artwork decorated one wall, a crayon masterpiece featuring 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "The funding committee approved our proposal for the job training program," Harper mentioned, shuffling through some papers. "We can start accepting applications next month." Ethan's face lit up. That's fantastic news. I've already had several shelter residents asking about it. He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. You know, sometimes I still can't believe how different things are now. A year ago, I was sleeping on cardboard. Harper reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. The familiar warmth of his skin against hers still sent tiny sparks through her body. And now you're helping others find their way out of similar situations. We're helping them, Ethan corrected her. Together. They worked through the afternoon, their conversation flowing easily between professional plans and personal matters. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office floor, Harper stretched and glanced at her watch. Want to take a walk? She suggested. I could use some fresh air. Ethan smiled, already standing to help her with her coat. I'd love to. The evening air was crisp, but not too cold as they stepped out onto the sidewalk. The street lamps were just beginning to flicker on, casting pools of golden light on the freshly fallen snow. Their boots crunched in perfect sync as they walked hand in hand down the familiar streets. They passed the spot where Ethan used to sleep, now transformed into a small garden maintained by Lily House residents. Purple winter kale and hardy evergreens added splashes of color to the urban landscape. I used to think this block was the end of my story, Ethan mused, his breath visible in the cold air. Turns out it was just the beginning. Harper squeezed his hand tighter, remembering the morning she'd first recognized him. Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their joined hands swinging gently between them. The neighborhood had changed in subtle ways since the Lily House opened. There were fewer people sleeping rough, more children playing in the community spaces they'd helped create. As they rounded the corner back toward the center, Harper stopped walking. Snow had begun to fall softly, catching in Ethan's dark hair. I didn't think it was possible, she said, her voice full of wonder. But here we are, building something together, piece by piece. Ethan turned to face her, his eyes filled with affection. The streetlight caught the silver threading through his temples, reminding Harper of all they'd been through to reach this moment. It's more than I ever imagined, Harper, he replied softly. He leaned down, and their lips met in a gentle kiss. Snowflakes swirled around them, and in that quiet moment, Harper knew with absolute certainty that they were finally walking the same path, hand in hand, heart to heart. The winter sunlight streamed through the windows of Harper's office, casting a warm glow over the scattered papers and architectural plans spread across her desk. Ethan sat beside her, his sleeves rolled up, a pencil tucked behind his ear as he studied the blueprint for the Lily House's new educational wing. Mr. Cole? A familiar voice cut through the quiet atmosphere. Ethan's head snapped up, his body tensing at the sight of Marcus Thompson standing in the doorway. The man's expensive suit and polished appearance were exactly as Ethan remembered from his days running his construction company. Marcus, Ethan said quietly, his throat tight. Memories of board meetings, contracts, and the days before everything fell apart flooded his mind. Harper looked between them, sensing the sudden shift in Ethan's demeanor. Can I help you? She asked, stepping forward protectively. Marcus adjusted his tie, his eyes fixed on Ethan. I heard you were here. Couldn't believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. He gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. You disappeared on us, Cole. The whole company fell apart after the accident. Ethan's fingers curled into fists under the desk. I didn't have much choice, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. No choice? Marcus scoffed. We could have helped you. The insurance, the lawyers, we had everything in place. Instead, you vanished, and 50 people lost their jobs when the company went under. The weight of those words pressed against Ethan's chest like a physical force. He could feel Harper's concerned gaze, but he couldn't meet her eyes. These were the parts of his past he'd tried so hard to forget. You don't understand, Ethan managed. After the accident, I couldn't. Couldn't what? Face us? Face reality? Marcus stepped further into the office. You were our leader, Ethan. We trusted you. Harper moved closer to Ethan, her presence steady and protective. I think that's enough, she said firmly. Marcus ignored her, his eyes still locked on Ethan. Do you know what happened to Jenny from accounting? Single mother of 3? She couldn't find work for months after we closed. Each word felt like a knife twisting in Ethan's gut. The faces of his former employees flashed through his mind. People who had depended on him, trusted him. I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice cracking. I was broken. The doctor said I wouldn't make it. When I did, I couldn't face anyone. The shame, the pain. He trailed off, overwhelmed by the memories. Marcus's expression softened slightly. We would have understood, Ethan. We were like family. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words and regret. Finally, Marcus sighed, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a worn business card and placed it on the desk. Some of us still get together sometimes, he said quietly. If you ever want to make things right. With that, he turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the card. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up, running his thumb over the faded text. Ethan, Harper said softly, placing her hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? He shook his head, unable to speak. The carefully constructed walls he'd built around his past were crumbling, and he felt exposed, vulnerable. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ethan went through the motions of work, but his mind kept returning to Marcus's words, to the faces of the people he'd let down. By evening, the weight of it all felt unbearable. Harper found him in the empty conference room, staring out at the city lights. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, offering silent support. I destroyed so many lives, Ethan finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Not just yours, but all of them. People who trusted me, depended on me. You were hurting, Harper said gently. That's no excuse. Ethan turned to face her, his eyes filled with pain. I was a coward. Instead of facing it, I ran. I let everyone down. Sometimes. He paused, swallowing hard. Sometimes I wonder if you'll realize that's who I really am. Someone who runs when things get tough. Harper reached out, taking his hands in hers. Is that who you are now? She asked. The man who spent years on the streets, keeping his daughter safe? The man who helps others at the shelter, who's building a place for families in need? Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. I'm trying to be better, he whispered. You are better, Harper said firmly. The past is part of you, Ethan, but it doesn't define you. I love you for who you are now, someone who faced his mistakes and chose to grow from them. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. We all have regrets, things we wish we'd done differently, but we're building something new here, together. The past can't hurt us unless we let it. Ethan held her tightly, feeling the tension slowly leave his body. In her embrace, the shadows of his past seemed less threatening, the weight of his guilt lighter. I love you, he murmured into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. Harper pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. Then trust in that love, she said softly. Trust that I see you, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. For the first time since Marcus's visit, Ethan felt peace settle over him. The past would always be there, but with Harper by his side, he knew he could face it. He could learn to forgive himself, just as she had forgiven him. They stood together in the quiet room, holding each other as the city lights twinkled beyond the windows. In that moment, Ethan understood that true healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting it and choosing to move forward, one day at a time. The church basement hummed with life as families gathered for the community celebration. Christmas lights twinkled along the walls, and the aroma of hot cocoa and fresh-baked cookies filled the air. Ethan stood near the entrance, his hands in his pockets, taking in the scene before him. Children darted between tables, decorated with red and green tablecloths. Parents chatted in small groups, their laughter mixing with the soft Christmas music playing in the background. Several families who had found help through the Lily House wore name tags with bright silver stars, a symbol of their journey from struggle to stability. Papa, look! Lily tugged at Ethan's sleeve, pointing to a craft table where kids were making paper snowflakes. Can I go? Ethan smiled, running a gentle hand over her hair. Of course, sweetheart. As Lily scampered off, Harper appeared at his side, carrying 2 steaming cups of cocoa. She handed one to Ethan, their fingers brushing. Penny for your thoughts? Ethan took a careful sip, his eyes following Lily as she joined the other children. Just taking it all in. He gestured to the room. 6 months ago, I was sleeping on cardboard, worried about keeping Lily warm. Now look at us. Harper leaned against him slightly, her shoulder touching his. You did that, Ethan. Your strength, your determination to keep going, that's what brought you here. We did it together, he corrected softly. You gave us a chance when nobody else would. Across the room, Mrs. Martinez, one of the Lily House's first residents, waved at them. She stood proud in her new nurse's scrubs, having recently completed her certification program. Her two young boys played near Lily, their faces bright with joy. "Remember when she first came to us?" Harper asked. "She was so scared, thinking she'd never get back on her feet." Ethan nodded, warmth spreading through his chest. "And now she's helping others at the free clinic." He paused, watching as more families filtered in. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." Pastor Mike approached them, his kind face creased with a smile. "Ethan! Harper! The turnout is wonderful tonight." He clasped Ethan's hand warmly. "You know, when you first started coming to our church, I could see the weight you carried. But look at you now, you're standing tall." Ethan felt his cheeks warm. "Thank you, Pastor. Your support meant everything during those hard times." "God works in mysterious ways," Pastor Mike said, his eyes twinkling. "Sometimes our greatest trials lead us to our greatest purpose." He excused himself to greet other arrivals, leaving Ethan and Harper in comfortable silence. They moved through the room, stopping to chat with various families. Each conversation held a story of transformation. A single father who'd found work through the Lily House's job training program. A mother who'd gone back to school while her children attended the center's daycare. Teenagers who'd found mentors and direction. At one point, Ethan caught sight of himself in a wall mirror. Gone was the haunted look he'd worn for so long. His shoulders were straight, his eyes clear. The shame that had once seemed permanently etched into his features had softened into something else. Peace, perhaps. Or acceptance. Harper noticed him looking. "What do you see?" "Someone different," he answered honestly. "Someone who's finally stopped running from his past." She squeezed his hand. "I see the man you've always been, just stronger now, because you've faced your fears." Near the craft table, Lily held up a perfectly cut snowflake, beaming with pride. Other children gathered around her, asking her to show them how she'd done it. She demonstrated patiently, her gentle teaching manner so like Harper's that it made Ethan's heart ache with joy. "She's flourishing," Harper murmured, watching their daughter. "Remember how shy she used to be? She gets her confidence from you," Ethan said softly. A small commotion drew their attention to the entrance, where volunteers were bringing in more chairs. The room had filled beyond expectations, with nearly twice as many families as they'd planned for. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. Each person here represented a life touched by second chances, the very thing he'd been given. "We're going to need a bigger space soon," Harper observed, but her tone was pleased. "Maybe that's our next project," Ethan suggested. The words came easily now, future plans no longer feeling like impossible dreams. They found a quiet corner near the Christmas tree where they could observe the entire gathering. Lily's laughter carried across the room as she played tag with her new friends, her dark hair flying behind her like a banner of joy. Ethan turned to Harper, emotion making his voice rough. This is everything I never thought I'd have. A family, a purpose. You." Harper's eyes shimmered with tears as she looked up at him. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally, like they'd never been apart. "And you, Ethan, you're home." The words settled over him like a blessing, filling all the broken places that had taken so long to heal. Around them, the celebration continued, a testament to hope, to redemption, to the power of love to rebuild what was lost. But in that moment, Ethan simply held Harper's hand, knowing at last that he belonged exactly where he was. The mahogany-paneled boardroom felt colder than usual as Harper Sterling sat at the head of the long table, her fingers interlaced tightly in front of her. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished surface. Around her, board members in expensive suits shuffled papers and exchanged meaningful glances. Marcus Chin, the head of acquisitions, stood at the front of the room, his laser pointer dancing across the projection screen. "The numbers don't lie, Harper. This partnership with Global Tech could triple our annual revenue within 2 years." Harper watched as the figures flashed before her eyes. Impressive projections, ambitious growth targets, and the promise of expansion that would make any CEO's heart race. But something felt off. "And what about the Lily House project?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. Marcus cleared his throat. "Well, that's where we need to make some adjustments. Global Tech's terms require full control of all our real estate holdings, including the building currently allocated for the shelter." The door opened quietly, and Ethan slipped in, taking his place at the back of the room. As the newly appointed director of community outreach, he had every right to be there, but some board members still viewed him with barely concealed disdain. "We're talking about displacing families," Harper said, her eyes meeting Ethan's across the room. "People who need our help." Richard Blackwood, the senior board member, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Harper, we're running a business, not a charity. The profits from this deal could fund 10 shelters elsewhere in more suitable locations." Ethan stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "More suitable locations? You mean where they won't affect property values?" The room fell silent. Harper felt her heart swell with pride as Ethan continued, his presence commanding attention despite his simple attire among the sea of designer suits. "I've been on both sides of this equation," he said, moving to stand beside Harper. "I've seen what happens when profit becomes more important than people. The Lily House isn't just a shelter, it's a symbol of hope for families who've lost everything." Marcus interrupted, his tone dismissive. "Mr. Cole, while your personal experience is touching, this is a business decision. The board needs to consider its soul," Ethan cut in, placing his hands on the table and leaning forward. "Every family at Lily House has a story. There's Sarah, who fled an abusive husband with her 3 kids. Michael, who lost his job and home after his wife died of cancer. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they're human beings." Harper stood slowly, drawing all eyes to her. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders, but Ethan's presence gave her strength. She remembered the cold nights she'd spent searching for him, the way he'd rebuilt his life from nothing, and the integrity he'd maintained through it all. "I've made my decision," she announced, her voice clear and confident. "We're rejecting Global Tech's offer." The room erupted in protests. Richard Blackwood's face turned red as he sputtered, "This is business suicide. The shareholders invested in my vision for this company." Harper cut him off. "A vision that includes both profit and purpose. We can find other partnerships, but we won't compromise our values." Ethan's hand found hers under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. The simple gesture spoke volumes of trust, of support, of shared conviction. "This meeting is adjourned," Harper declared, rising from her chair. The board members gathered their papers, muttering among themselves as they filed out of the room. She and Ethan walked out together, their fingers still intertwined. In the empty hallway, they paused, looking at each other with a mixture of determination and relief. "That was quite a speech," Harper said softly, studying his face. Ethan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I learned from the best. You taught me that sometimes standing up for what's right means standing alone. We're not alone." She replied, squeezing his hand. "We have each other, and sometimes that's enough." They walked toward the elevator, their footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. The decision would have consequences, they both knew that. The stock price would probably take a hit, and some investors might pull out. But as they stood side by side, watching the elevator numbers climb, neither of them had any regrets. Just before the elevator doors opened, Harper turned to Ethan. "Remember when you used to think you weren't worthy of being here?" He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I've never been more certain that you belong exactly where you are," she said, her voice full of pride and love. The elevator dinged, and they stepped inside together, still holding hands, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had chosen their path, not the easiest one, but the right one. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. The living room glowed with the soft light of Christmas tree lights, casting a warm radiance across the hardwood floors of their modest but comfortable home. Harper adjusted a handmade ornament, one of Lily's creations from school, while Ethan carefully balanced on a stepladder, hanging the last strand of lights along the crown molding. "A little to the left, Dad," Lily called out, her eyes sparkling as she directed her father's decorating efforts. She sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by boxes of decorations they'd collected over the past few months. Harper stepped back to admire their work. The tree wasn't the tallest or the most expensive, but it was perfect, each ornament telling a story of their journey together. There were the paper angels Lily had made at the shelter, now hanging proudly front and center. Simple wooden ornaments that Ethan had carved during his recovery filled the middle branches. And, near the top, a delicate crystal star that Harper had kept all these years, waiting for the right moment to bring it out again. "I think that's the last of them," Ethan said, carefully descending the ladder. His eyes met Harper's, and they shared a quiet smile. The past year had transformed them all, but especially him. The shame that once haunted his features had been replaced by a quiet confidence and peace. Lily jumped up from her spot on the floor, her dark curls bouncing. "Can we make hot chocolate now, with the little marshmallows?" "Of course, sweetie," Harper said, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. The word daughter still felt new and wonderful on her tongue. "Why don't you help me in the kitchen?" As they moved to the kitchen, the aroma of fresh-baked cookies filled the air. Earlier that day, they'd spent hours baking together, flour dusting their clothes as they laughed and shared stories. It was these simple moments that meant the most now. Ethan followed them, leaning against the doorframe as he watched his two favorite people work together. Harper measured out the cocoa while Lily carefully counted marshmallows into each mug. The kitchen was modest compared to Harper's old penthouse, but it was warm and lived in, filled with love and the memories they were building together. "Remember last Christmas?" Lily asked, her voice soft and thoughtful. "When we were at the shelter?" Harper's hand stilled on the pot of warming milk. Ethan stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "I do, sweetheart," he said, "but look at us now. We're home," Lily said simply, and the truth of those words filled the room with an almost tangible warmth. Harper stirred the hot chocolate, adding a dash of cinnamon, her mother's secret recipe. "And we always will be," she added, her voice thick with emotion. They carried their mugs back to the living room, settling onto the plush couch that faced the Christmas tree. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting the windowsills with white powder. The streetlights caught each falling flake, making them sparkle like tiny stars. Lily curled up between her parents, sipping her hot chocolate carefully. "Can we open one present tonight?" she asked, her eyes drawn to the carefully wrapped packages under the tree. Harper and Ethan exchanged glances over her head. "Well," Harper began, "there might be one special gift we could open early." Ethan reached behind the couch and pulled out a small wrapped package. "This one's for all of us," he explained, placing it in Lily's eager hands. Together, they unwrapped it to reveal a photo album. The cover was hand-carved wood, Ethan's work, with their names etched into the surface, the Cole family. As they flipped through the pages, they found photos from the past year. The ribbon-cutting ceremony at Lily House, Lily's school play, quiet moments at home, and even a few old photos Harper had kept from their college days. The last few pages were empty, waiting to be filled. "It's our story," Lily whispered, running her fingers over the pages. "And we're just getting started," Harper added, pulling both Ethan and Lily closer. They spent the next hour sharing stories about each photo, laughing at memories, and wiping away the occasional happy tear. The hot chocolate grew cold, forgotten in their mugs as they lost themselves in conversation. As the evening grew later, the snow continued to fall outside, creating a peaceful backdrop to their celebration. The Christmas lights twinkled, casting colorful shadows that danced across their faces. Lily began to yawn, though she fought to keep her eyes open. "I think it's time for someone to get ready for bed," Ethan said gently. "Santa won't come if you're still awake." Lily protested half-heartedly, but her drooping eyelids betrayed her exhaustion. Before heading upstairs, she hugged them both tightly. "This is the best Christmas ever," she declared. After Lily had gone up to bed, Harper and Ethan remained on the couch, their hands intertwined. The room felt peaceful, filled with the kind of contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. "Should we put out the cookies for Santa?" Harper asked with a smile. Ethan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "In a minute, let's just sit here for a while." They gazed at the Christmas tree, each lost in their own thoughts about how far they'd come. From that cold morning outside the office building to this warm, love-filled home, it seemed almost miraculous. Rising from the couch, they moved to gather around the tree. Ethan wrapped his arms around Harper from behind as they looked at the ornaments one more time. Each one represented a piece of their story, the struggles, the healing, and the love that had brought them together. Through the window, they could see the snow continuing to fall, creating a pristine blanket over their front yard. The street was quiet, peaceful, as if the whole world was holding its breath in anticipation of Christmas morning. Harper turned in Ethan's arms, her eyes meeting his. The love she saw there made her heart swell. "This is our forever," she whispered, her voice full of certainty and joy. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.